Could it really be true? Could a lion remember a single face after 20 years? Out of all the humans it may have seen, could it still recognize the one person who once held it close when it was a small, frightened cub caught in a blazing forest fire? Most people would laugh at the idea, but in the vast plains of the Serengeti, something happened that proved love does not follow logic. One evening, under the soft orange light of the setting sun, a powerful male lion walked across the tall grasses. No roar, no hunting posture, just silence and steady steps. Then, as if led by memory, the lion slowly rested its head on the shoulder of a woman, the very same woman who had once saved his life when he was too small to stand. It wasn't just a reunion. It was a quiet miracle, one that no one could have believed unless they saw it with their own eyes. And for anyone who's ever loved an animal like family, this story will feel like coming home. It all started in 2005, in the dry, unforgiving season of East Africa. The sun burned over the horizon as the dry wind blew dust across the scorched lands of the Mikumi Wildlife Reserve. Back then, a young volunteer named Elena had joined a small wildlife rescue project. She was just 22, fresh out of university, eager to make a difference. Elena spent her days helping care for orphaned animals, documenting their behaviors, and learning from the local conservationists. One morning, while checking the aftermath of a recent forest fire near the edge of the park, she heard something, barely a sound, coming from the brush. It was like a soft rustle, almost too faint to notice. But Elena paused, crouched, and pushed aside the burnt shrubs. There, curled up and shivering, was a lion cub. His fur was dirty and singed. One paw was lightly burned, and his eyes, wide, wet, and full of fear, locked onto hers. The cub didn't move. He was too weak. Elena gently picked him up, wrapped him in her loose shirt, and whispered, "It's okay now. I've got you." On the way back to camp, she gave him a name, Riku. Back at the rescue station, Elena worked day and night to nurse Riku back to health. She cleaned his wounds, fed him milk from a bottle, and wrapped him in a warm blanket at night. Slowly, he began to grow stronger. And soon, Riku became more than just a rescue. He became family. Like a giant house cat, Riku would follow Elena everywhere, tripping over his own paws, curling up beside her during rest breaks, and rubbing his head against her knees when he wanted attention. Elena never kept him caged. The rescue camp had a special enclosure for recovering predators, and within weeks, Riku had full run of the space. But even when he had the freedom to roam, he always stayed close to Elena. One day, she left the camp for a few hours to pick up supplies. When she returned, she found Riku sitting at the gate, unmoving. He hadn't eaten or played. He had waited, eyes glued to the forest trail, as if watching for her to return. When she stepped out of the jeep, he bolted into her arms, letting out soft, almost human-like whimpers. It was a bond no words could define, and for a while, they were just happy. But happiness in the wild is never permanent. As Riku grew older, stronger, and more independent, the rescue center made a difficult decision. He had to return to the wild. It was what they did with all their rescued lions. "It's for his own good," they told Elena gently. She nodded, knowing it was true, but her heart shattered inside. On the day of Riku's release, Elena walked him to the training gate herself. She knelt down, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Be strong out there. But if someday you miss me, you can come back." Riku stared at her for a long moment. Then, without a sound, he turned and walked away, into the grasslands, into the wild, into the unknown. Years passed -10, 15, 20. Elena was no longer the young volunteer with bright eyes and dirt on her jeans. She now lived in a small, peaceful town by the coast with her son Noah, a nature filmmaker who often traveled across the world to document wildlife. Elena spent her mornings on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sunrise over the ocean. On her lap sat an old photo, a young woman lying under a tree beside a lion cub. That was Riku, our boy. A miracle. She had never forgotten him. One summer, Noah invited Elena to join him on a documentary trip back to Tanzania. They would be visiting Mikumi again, filming changes in the ecosystem and documenting how the reserve had grown. At first, Elena refused. "I'm too old for adventures now," she said with a smile. But Noah insisted. "It's just a short trip. Maybe it'll bring back good memories." Something in his voice made her pause. Maybe it was time to go back. Maybe it was time to see the place where a part of her heart still lived. They arrived a week later, driving across the same dusty roads Elena had once walked. The land was the same, dry, golden, endless. But the reserve had changed. New facilities, more staff, better vehicles. Their guide, a young man named Kamari, spoke passionately about the animals. "There's a lion here," he said one afternoon, "that behaves unlike any other we've seen. His name is Riku. He's old now, but there's something strange about him. He doesn't attack. He doesn't roar. Once, he pressed his head into the shoulder of a ranger. No one knows why." Elena froze. Her hands gripped the edge of her seat. She looked out the window, her eyes wide. "Riku," she whispered. Could it be? Could it really be her Riku? That same evening, the group stopped near an open plain, waiting to capture shots of wildebeest migrating. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the grasslands in orange and gold. Suddenly, Kamari raised his hand. "Look," he said. In the distance, a lion was approaching. Slowly, carefully, not hunting, not threatening, just walking. As the lion came closer, everyone in the vehicle went silent. He was large, with a thick dark mane and a calm expression. But his eyes were searching, as if looking for something or someone. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She didn't wait. Her heart knew before her mind could catch up. Without asking for permission, she opened the vehicle door. "Mom," Noah said, alarmed. "It's all right," she replied. "I know him." She stepped down from the jeep. The wind blew gently through her hair. The grass touched her legs like soft fingers. The lion stopped, just a few meters away now. Elena stood still, barely breathing. "Riku," she called, her voice shaking. The lion looked up. Their eyes met. And then something unimaginable happened. The lion let out a sound, not a roar, not a growl, but a soft, aching cry, like a child who finally found his mother after being lost for years. He took a few steps closer. Then, gently, he lowered his head onto her shoulder. Elena reached out with trembling fingers, running them through the familiar fur of his mane. Her eyes filled with tears. The years fell away. The pain, the waiting, the wondering. It all melted. For a moment, they were back in the past. A girl and her cub. No one said anything. No one could. A few tourists cried. Kamari wiped his eyes. Noah captured the moment on film, hands shaking. But Elena said nothing. She just wrapped her arms around Riku's neck, and he leaned into her, as if to say, "Asterisk, I remember you." Asterisk word of the reunion spread quickly. Rangers, researchers, wildlife organizations. At first, people called it a coincidence. It's possible he recognized her scent, one biologist suggested. Maybe she reminded him of a caretaker from the past, another said. But then someone found old logs from 2005. There it was, a lion cub named Riku, rescued from a fire, raised by a volunteer named Elena. The story went viral. Photos of the elderly woman hugging a full-grown male lion under the African sky touched hearts all over the world. Experts began discussing lion memory. Some argued that lions can remember through emotional connections. Others said scent plays a bigger role than sight. But for Elena, there was no need to explain. Love doesn't follow science, she told a local reporter. Sometimes it just waits and remembers. Before she left the reserve, Elena was granted one last afternoon with Riku. No cameras, no crowds, just the two of them. They sat on a large rock under the setting sun. Riku lay beside her, his head resting near her lap. Elena stroked his mane slowly, gently. "Thank you for remembering me," she whispered. Riku didn't move, but his eyes closed softly, and he pressed his head into her palm, as if to say, "Asterisk, I never forgot." Asterisk, a few days later, Elena and Noah left Tanzania. But before she went, she handed Kamari a letter and a photograph, her and Riku beneath the sky. At the bottom of the letter were 10 simple words, written in her careful handwriting. Asterisk, asterisk, animals don't keep photographs, but they never forget love. Asterisk, asterisk, the story of Elena and Riku has since been told in classrooms, nature documentaries, and wildlife centres around the world. It's not just about a woman and a lion. It's about the kind of love that doesn't need words, that waits across decades, that returns without warning, but always with meaning. Maybe you once saved an animal. Maybe you've loved one more than you thought possible. And maybe, somewhere in the forest or field, it still remembers you, watching, waiting, hoping for one more moment to say,